We'll call this caucus to order. We'll start off by taking the roll. Mr. Kelly?
Here.
Mr. Arena?
Here.
Mr. Butita?
Here.
Ms. Crosby?
Here.
Mr. Booker?
Here.
Mr. Schultz?
Here.
Mr. Billich? You with us, Jazz? He's probably checking on something. Mr. Westcott? Mr. Westcott, I didn't hear you. I see Mr. Webster's trying to get in. You with us, Mr. Webster?
Yes, I'm here, getting a slow connection.
There you go. Again, Mr. Billich, Mr. Westcott, I see that you're here. If you're available, unmute your mic, just for the record. Good enough. We still have a majority of the caucus, so we'll keep moving. Mr. Webster, you have the invocation for this week? Just a friendly reminder. Consent agenda, unfinished business. It's the Shablasky appointment, the one that we've laid over once, if not twice before. Most of you probably seen my comments in the paper. I think Mr. Shablasky is a good guy. I think he's the right guy for the job. I think with his background and his history, I think he'll do well for us. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. He might help tame my done, and I hope that everybody will agree with that.
I do agree with that, Mr. Kelly. Thank you. I agree. He won't be able to single-handedly, but I think he will do the right things to try to make the difference. Mr. Schultz.
I can do this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What can you help me understand the status? I noticed that the District 4 appointment is not on the agenda for Thursday.
It will be. Chairman Haney and I have been talking about which way. We'll get to it at the end of the agenda. I will not. We won't get off without talking about it. Any other comments about Shablasky? I think hopefully the mood's there to take a vote on it. Hopefully it does not get laid over again. Whether it goes up, whether it goes down. Again, I hope that Mr. Shablasky wins the appointment, but hopefully we take action on it this Thursday. Ms. Crosby.
Do we know where the Democratic caucus is on Shablasky?
I don't know about the caucus as a whole. I know I've talked to several members. Let me back up to a couple of members who have said that they're okay with Mr. Shablasky, but I can't speak for the caucus as a whole. We'll move into standing reports then. Finance, there's nothing on the agenda for this meeting. Is there anybody else that's on finance with me that wants to add anything? I don't think there's much there right now. I know we're looking at costs and budget impacts. Goes on to zoning. Mr. Webster, have you anything for this meeting?
You're on mute, buddy.
Thank you for the reminder. Yeah, so we may be able to have a meeting in July. I think it's the 22nd or 23rd, be a Wednesday. And that first one would be to deal with the request for changing our ordinance to allow the pet pigs in the residential district, So that will be a hearing once again where it goes to zoning committee first, before it goes back down the pipe to ZBA, before it comes back to zoning committee, before it goes to the board. So, and then in August, perhaps if that works out in July, then perhaps we might be able to go back to a schedule of having regular committee meetings in August, we're hoping, okay? Other than that, the only other thing I wanted to tell you there is there's another issue concerning pigs. I shared this with Mr. Booker that may or may not come to fruition, but I just wanted to give you a heads up that the Department of Agriculture has a request for 2 hog farms out in the Durand area. And of course, I get a lot of phone calls on that already, and even from one of Fred's friends called about that. So I've been looking into it. I'm just giving you a heads up. There's nothing there right now, but if it does come to fruition, I would expect we'll all get phone calls on these 2 hog farms, very large hog farms. So 4,974 hogs at each farm, 2 locations. So, okay, so Aaron, I've been on top of it. I met with some people twice already, and I called Chesney and gave him the heads up on it as well. And I can sit down with you and go over everything that I know already if you'd like. But there's no immediate action.
Excellent. Thank you for that update, Mr. Webster.
Thank you.
We got economic development, Mr. Billich. Jazz, you there for economic development? I think we'll skip and we'll go down to operations. We'll come back to them. Operations has one ordinance amending Chapter 50 of the Winnebago County Code of Ordinances related to food establishment operations during the COVID-19 pandemic, and that's to be laid over. This did pass committee. I voted against it. One of the reasons I voted against it is their thought is they would like to streamline the process instead of going to court, have everything happen within the health department. So if they find Mr. Kelly's got a restaurant, he's in violation, instead of having to go to court to say everything was okay, they want to do it internally within the health department. Well, to me, that'd be like the sheriff sentencing people. I like the splitting up. I like having another agency take a look to make sure that it's on the up and up. Just in general, disappointed with the health department's movement during this COVID pandemic. And I'd like to see us take more aggressive steps than maybe the state is right now. I see Ms. Crosby with your hand up. Go ahead.
I got a call from, gosh, what happened here? Oh, there we go. I got a call from John Cabello on Friday morning, and he was really upset with me because I supported the ordinance. Since that time, I have looked into the county code, and the county code today requires an administrative hearing from the health department. I read it verbatim, so there is no need for a court order right now because the county health department has all the power in the world to take away someone's livelihood. I went ahead and I called Boone County and talked to their administrator. I talked to the administrator in Freeport. No, I talked to the county chair in Freeport, and I was going to make a couple calls today, but it's a Monday and my schedule just got blown to smithereens and I had no time to do it. But Boone County is not officially open. Freeport is letting anybody open that wants to, but call your attorney. I have not talked to Ogle, which I intend to, DeKalb or McHenry, which I'd like to do probably tomorrow. So as of this conversation, I'm not going to support the ordinance as it's presented right now. I don't have enough information. John Cabello's argument is the governor is only allowed a 30-day window to exercise an executive order. After that, his hands are tied, but he's blown past that. He's extended his executive order week after week after week after week. And according to Cabello, and he's right, that the governor has no authority to at will extend any executive order. So I'm kind of on the fence, and I'm more inclined not to support this. Not that I want to see people shut down, but I think Martell has an opportunity not to do that. At the same time, guys, when I'm hearing from Cabello that she's the till of the Hun, the guy from Freeport, the chairman over there, told me that she's very aggressive against the orders of the governor. She has a reputation for pushing back. So I've gotten all kinds of information, a lot of it conflicting, and I'm still searching it out. And as I get more information tomorrow, those that want me to forward it to them, please let me know and I'll be sure to do that. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Ms. Crosby. Mr. Arena.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Crosby, I would like you to share the information you obtain with me. So my concern with this is because primarily, as it's written, it states that the health department alone decides what the guidelines will be. During the committee meeting, they pointed to the state guidelines, but as the ordinance is written, they could deviate from that, and there's no, it would be completely at their discretion. Secondly, it's open-ended. It stays in effect for as long as the health department wants it to stay in effect. So I understand they might have good intentions, but for me to support it, it would have to be structured. The guidelines would have to be spelled out, and there'd have to be a sunset, 60 days, 90 days, somewhere where we know we would revisit it and be able to see, how it all worked out. So as is, I'm going to be voting no. Thank you.
It's a good point, Mr. Arena. I forgot about that. It's very, very open-ended on when it will end. Mr. Webster.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with what Paul said, and I agree with the conversation at your committee meeting the other night. I didn't weigh in on it, but I heard the comments that Aaron made and what you made, and I agree with that. And I was really kind of shocked there that Paul made a motion to lay that over, and that got defeated. That motion got defeated, if I followed it correctly. But now you're telling me Thursday it will be laid over?
It is an ordinance, so it's in for the first reading.
Okay, so it's not going to be laid over to go back to committee, though.
At this point, I'm not intending on that. We need to get more information. We need to learn more, but being that it is an ordinance, I would urge us not to suspend and allow it to lay over to the next meeting like ordinance.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Is there anybody else to speak on this ordinance? If not, we'll go back to Mr. Billets for economic development.
Are we still speaking on the ordinance, you said?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, in regards to the ordinance, I did actually have at length, I spoke with a couple people in regards to that. I actually, originally, I liked the idea of what the ordinance was, but definitely there needs to be more language in regards to how much say that certain groups are going to have, especially the health department. The health department has actively, obviously, not saying anything bad about them, but they did not want to do reopenings or something like that because they had concerns. One thing that I'd rather make it is actually have some kind of input from another organization, even if it's got to be 25% from the health department, 25% from the chairman, and and so on and so forth. I think that it needs to have more direct and more precise wording, as well as making sure that the powers that be that are in charge of that are going to be able to be awesome. So it's not just one person making the final say or one group making the final say on that. A lot of businesses right now are hurting. I do get asked every day about when are we going to be reopening, even to 25% or even to 50%. Every restaurant in this area, every bar in this area, they are okay with having just a percentage open up. They are okay with having certain specific rules that they would have to follow. Maybe somebody that's counting at the door, having somebody that's always going to be there, a manager that's going to sit there at the door and count everybody who's in, everybody who's out. That's fine. One of the biggest things is this patio opening has actually helped a lot. It's boosted a lot for this industry, but it's not going to carry them through. It definitely is prolonging and making sure that they have some kind of base where they can actually make something and continue to operate. And it's helping as far as reopening. A lot of places have been able to rehire and hire new people. So maybe this is a way for them to reorganize, but I think that we need to make it a faster kind of progression, because otherwise they're just going to lose even more staff. They're going to lose even more customer base. We're going to keep losing customers to the north of the border to Beloit, to Janesville, to all those other areas where there are now right now are actually very popular with our community to go up that way. So I think that we're really going to be shooting ourselves in the foot if we don't move forward. But we definitely need to make sure that we make those kind of amendments because we need to make sure that businesses have a fighting chance.
I agree. One thing, I know you know the restaurant industry much better than I, but what happens if it rains Friday night? You know, I think that's why it's important to get even my number's 33%. And I have no scientific basis to that other than that we can have a 3-step plan to get back to open. But I like 33%. That way we're not sitting on top of each other. We're not very, you know, we're doing social distancing. We can keep reasonable accommodations, keep everything clean. But outdoors is great. It's terrific. I love being outdoors. I think we need to move forward from that as well. Anyone else on the ordinance? If not, I'll go back to Mr. Billits for his economic development report. Mr. Billits.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As far as economic development, we did pass. I apologize, I don't have it pulled up right now. I didn't have it on the computer. But we did actually pass as far as the annual host fee funds that we've given to the extension of Northern Illinois, to the Keep Northern Illinois Beautiful group, the Severson Dells group, the ones that we annually give to, that did pass unanimously. It is a smaller amount than what we gave last year. We had a few things fall off. So it's not a big difference, but it's still a difference. And we actually did discuss, we would like to give a little bit more in regards to Severson Dells and the Keep Northern Illinois Beautiful because they had a higher request than what we actually approved. But we also did want to add some stipulations. So we're going to work on that as far as the resolution later on down the road. For right now, we approved what we had as far as the annual gives, and that's all we have.
Thank you, Mr. Billits. Are there any questions for Mr. Billits and his committee? Seeing none. Public Works doesn't have anything. Is there anybody on Public Works that anything shaken or anyone want to talk about? If not, we'll move to Public Safety with Mr. Booker.
Thank you, Chairman. We just have one item on the agenda, and it's a resolution to extend. I don't have it up here. Somebody help me out. To extend
Disaster declaration.
the what?
Disaster proclamation.
Yes, we're extending McChesney Parks and disaster. That's why I was getting them jumbled. So the disaster declaration. Is there any discussion on that?
Mr. Arena.
That it seems to me this is about spending money. And Chairman Haney stated that we have all the personal protection equipment we'll need for the rest of the year. I'm still concerned about, ultimately it comes down to our emergency operation plan. When this first happened, there was resistance to us reviewing that plan. I think ultimately in the long run, we need to revisit that plan to make sure in the future when something happens, there's more inclusion from more people. I still think a lot of decisions are being made behind closed doors in a way that we can't revisit and look at what's being decided and why. And I have a problem with that. And I don't think it's absolutely necessary that we keep spending more money. And so I wouldn't say I'm firm on it, but at this point, I'm inclined to vote no on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arena. Mr. Webster.
Thanks. I've always wondered what we talk about. If we don't sign this or that, we're in danger of losing all kind of money in that. But I've never heard about any numbers about what are we in danger of losing. And as far as I know right now, we've got enough masks to mask everyone in the county if they ask for one, I think. But so what are we in danger of losing financially other than the personal protection stuff? I'm trying to figure that out. Somebody help me, please.
Sure, I can speak to this a little bit from my background. Operating costs, standing up the EOC, anything that we spent money on, resources, supplies, or otherwise, has a potential of being reimbursed once this is all over. I have my personal opinion that I don't think we're going to get reimbursed for all of it anyways. I do know that everything that we've done thus far that's been under the disaster declaration, we can vote no and just end it, and all things that happen during that period will still be reimbursed. I've talked to a few people who are luckily much smarter than me about this, and it's like a wildland fire out in California. They stand up, they have emergency operations, declare an emergency, but that's kind of a finite thing. In 6 weeks or 2 months, the fire is out and things are done. I don't think this is going to be out in 6 weeks or 2 months. So are we going to continue on the emergency declaration for another year and a half or whatever that ends up being? That's where I'm kind of with Mr. Arena. I don't know that it's entirely necessary right now, but before I was going to make a motion to cut it to 14 days while we did more homework. I don't want to step out from not having it at this point because I don't want to do something silly and then put a lot of taxpayers on the hook for bills that we could have had reimbursed. But I think we need to do some good homework and figure out what exactly does it mean whether we do or do not have this declaration current.
Follow up, please. So just for example, then, do we know, say in the past, I don't care, pick a number, 30 days or whatever, how much have we, I don't know, how much could we have made or lost, whatever, by declaring this disaster thing in the last 30 days? Anybody have a tabulation of the money that we're talking about for a 30-day period or anything? I'm really curious about that because, everything's so wide open and there's no definitive answers on anything.
Right. I think this goes to Mr. Arena's frustration. What is this? Why is it really necessary? I'll hit Mr. Salgado, see if he's got any good answers on that. That's a great question. Not just PP money, but everything. What have we spent in its entirety? So I have Mr. Schultz, then Mr. Booker. Mr. Schultz?
Thank you, Chairman. One of my thoughts that's affecting me in the no category is that the Finance Committee was involved in the PPE conversation that was going to be reimbursed by the state, which was then in turn getting their money from the federal government for the PPE. And the conversation early on was, we're going to get all of this money back and we don't have to worry about this because we're going to get it back in a timely manner. And then whatever weeks later, Ann says, well, I don't think we're going to see that money for at least a year, maybe a couple of years. It's very time consuming and involved. The forms you have to fill out, the data you have to collect. And that was very upsetting to me because whether it was intended or not, it just felt like, okay, we're on the hook for now over $600,000 was the last tally that they showed us. And we have to cash flow that at a time where money is tight. And so that was very troubling to me.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Mr. Booker?
Thank you, Chairman. I did speak with Mike Mund. Keith, I think you know Mike somewhat, don't you?
Sure.
He's in charge of the EOC now. It sounds like the EOC has gone through several changes through the fire department. But I was just speaking with Mike Munn the other day, and he suggested that I get with Steve Chapman and Ann Johns. And as Mr. Schultz pointed out, there are forms that still need to be completed and such. So I will definitely meet with, or at least talk to, Steve Chapman and Ann Johns before Thursday night's meeting. I wish I'd have had that for everyone right now, so my apologies there. But yeah, I think Ann Johns would have would provide some constructive input as well as Steve Chapman. So as far as can we do this in a 14-day, as Mr. McDonald suggests, or do we need to extend it, or is it just a no? As we're all in agreement, we just got to make sure that our Winnebago County residents aren't on the hook for all this. We need to get whatever funds we can get from the state and the feds on this EOC and this pandemic thing. So I'll get with Ann Johns and Steve Chapman within the next 2 days. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Booker. Is there anything else for the declaration? Moves us on to new business. I did talk to Chairman Haney over Saturday morning because it was missing. I know Mr. Webster and I spoke about it last caucus. I was too late, but I did ask him to put Mr. Zintek's name on the agenda. I need to call him and just tell him, put the name on the agenda. He wanted to do it, if we do it open-ended, that we could do a couple of them. I know his frustrations, he just wants to get somebody in there. And I agree with him. Whichever way it ends up is the way that it ends up. Hopefully after what is the 11th, we'll have 20 board members once again. I'm making a presumption that nobody's changed their mind on this, right? We were pretty split right down the middle with Zintek and Lindmark. And that's my argument, is everything is the same. The chairman did ask me to have another vote in caucus, and I told him I really don't think that's necessary. I think all of us, our heels are dug in pretty well. I don't think another vote is necessary for this. So if you have changed your mind on something, let me know. But I told the chairman bring up Mr. Zintek's name, and we'll give that a whirl. Any discussion to that? Mr. Schultz.
I guess I just need to say that, when we dealt with the state's attorney and the first person failed, there just wasn't a long, convoluted process with the thought in mind that the first candidate would be brought back up for an additional vote later. And somehow in this process, that is how, from my perspective, it has been convoluted to become. So, we don't just keep bringing back candidates that fail, we move on. And that is a frustration for me that I needed to at least express.
I thank you, Mr. Schultz. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. This is a local office normally elected by the people within the district. And I always thought that anybody within the district ought to be able to have a say in the appointment. This is not a county-wide elected office. I may not agree with the views of the person who we're not nominating. There may be a political agenda, but regardless, if that's the will of the people in that area, that ought to prevail.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kelly. Are there any comments left to that? One other thing I'd like to ask the caucus is I'm itching to see you guys in face-to-face once again. I think the fifth floor, I think that room is a little bit small, but I'm curious from you guys, what's your risk tolerance? Would you be open to the next caucus meeting face-to-face in a large room where we can maintain social distancing, understanding that there's 11 or 12 of us, so we're breaking the 10-person rule, but I think we could do it responsibly. Mr. Schultz, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just was looking online today in our region, according to the IDPH or HP or whatever they are, their site, every one of the 4 regions was within the ability to go to phase 4 if that decision were made as of today. And then I looked at, okay, when is the earliest that phase 4 could happen? It said June 26th. So I'm just wondering if pretty rapidly, Mr. Chairman, we're going to get to the up to 50, which is what the number was when I looked at phase 4. So I think it's not going to be a problem in short order.
And you would be safe, obviously tonight's over, but the next caucus, you would feel comfortable meeting us in a large room? Okay. The next, I don't know if 303 is large enough. If any of you have any other ideas of a large opening, Mr. Webster, what do you?
I think that there are a lot of pavilions at our forest preserves. I don't know why we couldn't meet under one of them. It's a summer time, I think it's could be warm enough. We could play it by ear, see what the weather forecast looks like and give that a whirl. Just to
Not a bad idea. I agree with you. Weather could be iffy, but maybe that could be a primary site. And I don't want to get it too complex because half of us will be at the pavilion, the other half will be at the other room. But yeah, I would like to do something, whether it's outside or in a large somewhere. And I like to try to keep it. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's a lot of large open pavilions where we could easily be sitting 6, 8, 10 feet apart.
Excellent. And I'd like to keep it somewhere near downtown, so that way it's kind of the same journey we would have made anyways. You know, I'd rather not put it up somewhere different. I'm trying to keep it a reasonable accommodation for all members in a central location. I'm open. If anybody has any ideas through the week before the next caucus, let me know. I think Gus just sent a message too that he thinks that we can maintain the 6 feet in 303. So maybe that is an option. I'll take a look around, but I think unless somebody doesn't feel the same, let's do an in-person caucus next time. Is there anyone else with anything for this evening's caucus? Mr. Arena?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We skipped personnel and policy. They did schedule a meeting tomorrow after the ad hoc meeting. Dave Kerlinkus informed me that, you know, the ad hoc committee is strictly advisory. So the policy that we're putting together for the procedure on selecting the administrator needs to be formalized or ratified by personnel and policy. So hopefully we'll wrap up any details tomorrow, and then we'll have to vote on that on Thursday. So I will try to get in touch with Mr. Fiducia tomorrow to make sure he makes Chairman Haney aware that that needs to be added to the agenda for Thursday. And we have a schedule for the interviews now. It'll be the week of the 22nd. The board members who are not part of the ad hoc committee will meet with the candidates in like a meet and greet format, and we'll have assessment forms that they'll fill out and submit. The workplace was very adamant that for your input to be considered, you got to do all 3 candidates. It's going to be on 3 separate days. I just got the schedule late this afternoon, so I will send that out in the morning. So 3 days during the week, you'll need to come in and just meet the candidates, and then the ad hoc committee will conduct interviews in the morning. The meet and greet will be attended by board members who are not part of the ad hoc and the other county elected officials. And so the other county electeds will also fill out the assessment forms. And I'm going to ask that people, you know, rank on the assessment forms, their order of preference, so we can kind of get a feel for, you know, it's not just subjective, that we have, you know, we can look at a numbering system and know, you know, which candidate has the majority of the support. So that's where we're going now. We'll finalize those details tomorrow. Does anyone have questions about the process?
Mr. Butita?
Yeah, Paul, when at our last ad hoc meeting, we had the discussion about the open meetings violation possibility with our voting. Did you get any determination whether or not that was going to be the case, or were we going to be allowed to do it?
Well, we're not really going to do the straw poll as we discussed it. If we just are getting forms submitted to us that are assessments by everyone, and on each form, everyone is just creating a ranking, it gives us a sense for what the majority preference is. And they structured the meet and greet so that there's no Open Meeting Act violations between the board members who do that, and the ad hoc committee is going to meet in a formal meeting. So we addressed it. And I think what changed from the last ad hoc committee meeting to now is we had talked about doing all of this in one day with all of the candidates, and there was conversation that took place, and it was just determined that that was just going to be too much, that we probably couldn't give the candidates the attention that they deserve. And so therefore it was separated out so that we're doing each one individually on a separate day. So that week of the 22nd will be busy for the members of the ad hoc committee.
Thank you for reminding me that I had missed personnel policy, Mr. Arena. Thank you. Is there any other questions for Paul of the ad hoc committee? Seeing none, is there anything else, any other business? If not, can I get a motion to adjourn? Motion by Mr. Booker, seconded by Ms. Crosby and Mr. Webster. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays?
Aye.
Very much.